Let's queer up breaking news. Students, parents, and authors sue Florida school district over book ban. 6 Florida students, their parents, and 2 authors have sued a Central Florida school district yesterday for banning some students access to a children's book about 2 male penguins who raise a baby penguin together. Last year, the school board of Lake County near Orlando barred students who are in kindergarten through 3rd grade from accessing And Tango Makes Three, a 2005 book based on a true story about 2 male penguins at the New York City's Central Park Zoo who adopted and raised an orphaned penguin chick named Tango. The district said at the time that its decision was based on Florida's parental rights in education law. Last month, DeSantis signed a bill that expands the law all the way to the 12th grade in high school. The new measure prohibits sexual orientation or gender identity instruction in pre-kindergarten through 8th grade. Tuesday's lawsuit argues that the law is vague and overbroad and that the district, by restricting access to And Tango Makes Three, violated the First Amendment. The authors, Peter Parnell and Justin Richardson, and 6 students aged 5 to 12 joined the lawsuit through their parents or legal guardians because they're interested in reading the book for a variety of reasons. This is very big news. The reason this is very big news is finally, and my goodness, it's only taken us a year and 4 months to get to the legal challenge. The most important aspect of this filing yesterday against Lake County is going to be the First Amendment claim. Because what they're going to have to now do is defend that kindergarten through 3rd grade do not have constitutional First Amendment rights. And as a result, it's going to be a slog uphill for them to defend that stance that a book like Tango is one that should not be accessible to students in a classroom or a library situation. If I was betting $1, we're going to see a stay from this. Then if I was betting a second $1, the federal court is going to sustain this lawsuit. Now, I'm not going to yet bet my third $1 on the Supreme Court's decision on the constitutionality of the First Amendment right. But this is a very good sign of what is going to come next from this incredibly vague and hateful legislation that has taken place in Florida.
You know what's interesting to me is the ages of the students named in the lawsuit. Ages 5 through age 12. What is that? That's kindergarten through roughly 6th or 7th grade. So they're basically putting it out there so that all the defendants will have standings, not just the parents. It will also be the students who are being denied access as well. So I think that's a very key point that I don't want to get lost in here, because this is fighting not just last year's pre-K through 3. It's now fighting, pardon me, through the 8th grade or 12th grade, depending on which particular version of the law you're looking at.
To take a highlighter to the point, and it might have been missed in the story that we just did, the claimants say they want to read the book. Yeah. That's the challenge of the First Amendment. It's not whether they've read the book, because we know preemptively what we're going to hear. Well, you can see the book someplace else. And everyone will want that argument to be made. So it's free speech outside the environment of a classroom in a Florida school. They've set the state up to, okay, answer that question. They want to read this book. If they want to read this book, do they have a constitutional right to read this book? Not that you can find the book someplace else. Not that you can find the book online. And I just add to your point.
That you could read it in their school. That is the point of it.
That is the constitutional argument.
This is so freaking ridiculous. Like, it's just beyond ridiculous. I remember when we did the story when they initially had taken this book out, and Tango Makes Three. You know, I mean, and you know, since they extended Don't Say Gay to 12th grade, you're telling me that a 17-year-old can't read a story about 2 penguins adopting a baby? Like,
they're very delicate.
They're very delicate individuals at 12th grade.
Yeah.
Well, and there's some other challenges, I think, coming up around the country. I noticed a story in particular that I thought was a little piece of good news on this, where Illinois banned basically the banning of books in their public library system. So I'm sure that there's going to be a conservative group that then challenges that. But Al, I 100% agree. It's going to go federal, and whether it's the Tango case or Illinois or a similar challenge, the First Amendment is going to have to be weighed in this context.
Well, if I'm a betting man, the 5-year-old, and they don't have the constitutional right to do that. I don't think that's going to get affirmed.
Wait, explain clear, because if I don't understand, many viewers.
Well, you were mentioning that the question that you think is going to be the main issue is whether a 5-year-old has a constitutional right to be able to read this book, and
you're saying you don't think the court will say they have a constitutional right?
Correct.
Oh.
What about the 8-year-old or the 12-year-old?
I don't think. No, I don't think so. I think another question that kind of comes before this one is who decides what goes into the libraries to begin with before we're even taking them out. Because, of course, there's plenty of books, I'm sure, that you would agree don't belong, pornographic books, whatever, that belong in an elementary school library. But,
But what would you say is a pornographic book?
A book that has explicit sex scenes, that's talking about sexual positions, about gangbangs, talking about all that stuff.
An anatomy book.
Gangbangs?
No, I'm not saying gangbangs.
That's what I'm talking about.
I'm saying, but like an anatomy book would be, showing sexual things.
Well, okay,
But as I stated before, I said things of a sexual nature, not as far as human growth and development, but I'm talking pornographic gangbangs, things like that.
Yeah, but that's not an issue at all.
Yes, that is in a public library.
Not in a school public library?
Exactly. This is what I'm talking about. It's like, what are the guidelines and who is deciding that? As I don't know who is making the decisions about which book, who's reviewing that and in the school board. And I think that is kind of another question that we have to have before we're talking about.
Well, Trini, I will tell you, I know who is deciding which books are not in the library, and that's any one parent. Right now, under the current law, any one parent can come in and say, I don't like this book, and then they have to review it. And then I don't like this book. And the fact is, it's essentially a public library. Parents move into certain school districts, and we know that, and that's been going on for a while. Parents move into a district, they send their children to a particular school, and it's a public school. And they shouldn't be able to have one parent from some right-wing nut be able to come in and say, no, this. And
I 100% agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with the position that the child should be able to look at two penguins. That's not really a sexual story. It's just two animals. It's ridiculous. I'm just saying that when, in the context of the book bans and the constitutionality of it, that's what I was just addressing.
Just in regards to the First Amendment, though, I'm not aware of any way in which the First Amendment rights of a younger person are more limited than adults. In fact, I think it actually goes the other way around, that, for an adult to yell fire in a movie theater, like that's something that's not covered under free speech. But if a kid does that, you're like, okay, that's a kid being a kid. So I think if anything, kids have more freedom or kids have an even bigger right to free speech in the First Amendment than anybody else.
Well, How could that even be true, though? Because if you have a parent that can tell your child, a 5-year-old, you can't say this, then the child is not going to say, I have
and Mark,
it's the government
in
saying
clarity,
saying
yes. And see, that's
Congress
a real
shall
important
make no law.
distinction here, that this lawsuit is saying that they have a constitutional right to free speech, which is an access granted through the government entity. And in this instance, the government entity is the school. And so you can't abridge this free speech access through the government entity. What happens in the family unit of what the parent wants to happen in the family is a different issue.
Right, but the school has to have their contract with the parent of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. They're not making a contract with the child, they're making it with the parent if you're enrolling the child in school. So, I just don't see that this is even a remote possibility, but I'm curious to see how it...
And Mark, I have to respectfully disagree with your take on children having more access and more constitutional freedoms. Supreme Court's more liberal than the current makeup of the court have upheld parental notifications on abortion and other types of health care. So I don't know how far that particular argument would go.
Yeah, agreed.
And again, I remind production I'm having difficulty following a clock. We are Queer News Tonight, the world's first and only live daily LGBTQ+ evening news show from Happening Out Television Network. In the model of PBS and NPR, we educate, inform, and entertain by supporting the 10 pillars of the LGBTQ+ community, with more than 100,000 a week watching on Roku, Apple Television, and other channels. To keep the stories going, we accept donations with 100% transparency. Stay updated and live authentically with Queer News Tonight.